Hello and welcome to the first episode of Around the Lake. This is a new roundtable featuring the editors and reporters with the Ithaca Times and the Finger Lakes community newspapers. My name is Lou DePietro. I'm an associate editor with the Ithaca Times, and I am joined today by Carrie Blakinger. She is a reporter with the Finger Lakes community newspapers. We have, to my right, to your left, is Glynis Hart. She is the editor of the Finger Lakes community newspapers. And over here is Chris Hooker. He is the sports reporter for the Finger Lakes community newspapers. He also doubles as a reporter in sections of Tompkins County. The whole point of this show will be to run through the week's stories that are happening in our county, in and around our county, and we'll just open it up and see what happens. Let's start off with election coverage. Yesterday was the big election day, governor's race, congressional race, 23rd District. Arguably the biggest one being the 23rd congressional race between Martha Robertson, the hometown candidate, and Tom Reed. Reed looks like he'll be heading back to Congress. So what do we think?
Well, the question was whether Martha Robertson would give Reed a run for his money. 2 years ago, Nate Shinagawa actually did that. Reed's campaign, it offended some Ithaca people because he is running on sort of a right-wing platform, going after the rural voters, protesting the SAFE Act. It wants to repeal the SAFE Act and so on. So Martha Robertson out in Corning, where Reed is from, seen as too left or too progressive for that. Nate Shinagawa, who was her campaign manager, got pretty close to knocking Reed off his perch. Martha did not manage to do that this year.
And like you started to mention, part of his platform his campaign was about insulting Ithaca, referring to Martha as an extreme Ithaca liberal, which is, pretty rare to actually base your campaign on insulting one of the cities in your district.
Keep in mind, though, that Robertson's only county victory, was Tompkins County.
County.
Reed knew that going in, and he knew, well, why even bother putting in a ton of effort, if I can use them as a punchline, to Western New York voters who are typically conservative voters. And that was something that I asked Robertson on the phone before the debate. How are you gearing your message? You're labeled as a leftist, extreme liberal. How do you then communicate your viewpoints and your stance on things in Western New York? Because she spent a lot of time there, as did Nate 2 years ago.
Walking around, knocking on doors.
And her answer was, I tried my best, and I tried to, I don't see party lines. That was kind of the answer that I got. But I think in reality there is an approach to how do I talk to Western New Yorkers? How do I get my viewpoints across without, talking about fracking? Fracking was, for instance,
I was going to bring up fracking.
Was a topic that seemed to get downplayed on her campaign as we kind of approach Election Day. Am I wrong on that?
I think that fracking played differently in this election than it did 2 years ago. At this point, the folks in Tioga County and maybe Broome County and Chemung, they're tired of waiting on the state. They're waiting for the moratorium to end. They would like to see fracking in their counties because economically they are just staggering. They're really in trouble down there. Their unemployment rate is up to 16%. It's 8% in the rest of New York State. So with Martha being anti-fracking, I think that did not play well in those counties.
Well, that certainly helped her in Tompkins County, because Dryden and Groton are two towns that are very, very anti-fracking. They've put in things in place to make sure it doesn't happen. Groton, they were trying really hard to get a moratorium in their town, and they had several public hearings, and people were very outspoken about not wanting to have fracking in their town. They didn't end up doing it, but the effort to put into it was there. And Dryden obviously had the townwide moratorium. That was a pretty big deal.
Yeah. Well, there's the zoning.
Dryden is banned fracking. They were the first town in New York State to do so.
But the SAFE Act, I think we'd be wrong to not bring up how important the SAFE Act was to this whole thing. I just felt like it, to my eyes, and to me, it just seemed like that was a Cuomo thing, a state level thing that brought out a lot of conservative voters. and said, we got to get rid of this. And I feel like suddenly Robertson's got to sit up there and say, to really kind of state her case about the SAFE Act. Ultimately, she voted against it at the county. She repeated that ad nauseum at every single debate. She said, I voted against it. I didn't support it at all, but still, that was an uphill climb for her the entire debate, it seemed like, or I mean, campaign.
Right, because you were seen as a Democrat, and Democrats supported the SAFE Act.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then, Reed comes to mind. Reed's campaign, he came to Cornell. He came to Lansing. There was a town hall. He prides himself on having a lot of town hall meetings.
Right.
He went to Lansing.
He went to the Danby Pirates Club. I mean, he posed for the Coyote shoot. I mean,
he went to Interlake and Sportsman Club.
Right. He went
Where
to
I'm
the
getting at was
Club. Yep.
That's not necessarily throwing your neck out and saying, all right, let's go up to Interlake and Sports Club and tell them how I'm going to get this leftist out of. I'm going to knock this leftist off her podium and take back Congress. It's like. I felt he could have been a little bit bolder. I think he would have earned a lot of respect of voters if he just showed up and tried a little bit. But the whole extremeethicalliberal.com thing was like, all right, dude, come on. It looks like you've decided you're not going to.
That he didn't have to. He didn't have to bother.
He didn't have to bother.
We don't need any help from him.
We need to. We just figured that he's not our guy.
I'm going to drive.
And this is something that I wrote about with the Times. It's like, what now? Now that he's reelected, what do you bring into the table for Tompkins County now?
Is he going to close his office here? I mean, he did open one, as of last year.
Cayuga coal plant is a huge issue right now. That's something that's going to get a lot of state attention, and we're going to need somebody that's going to speak for everybody, regardless of where your stance on whether they're going to retrofit it or they're going to, turn the coal plant into a gas power plant, whatever. Is Reed going to be involved in that? Is he going to speak for the majority of constituents? I mean, that's just one issue. But the general idea here being, all right, you've pretty much insulted everybody in the county to kind of, I don't know, to make yourself, I guess, more appealing to your conservative voters. Now that it's over and you're reelected, what can we expect from you being from Ithaca? Are you gonna be out looking for? Are you gonna have our backs? Are you gonna go to bat for us?
We'll see.
Haven't heard an answer to that question. Well, that's just one of the races. I mean, Cuomo and Astorino was another one. Not surprising in the least that Cuomo kind of took this one.
Cuomo took this one. Yeah, and not hugely, but I guess for a sitting governor, it did pretty well. I think it was 53%.
Was that what it was?
Right.
Well, I mean, how much do you think the Moreland Commission, that whole scandal, if you will, about him setting up this anti-corruption committee to look at his state level kind of committees and state politicians, and ultimately
once it started looking at his guys,
he said, no.
Pull the plug on that one.
How much did that play into the race?
I wish it had played in more than it did, but but the corruption charges, I mean, they seem to just bounce off people. I mean, also in Broome County, State Senator Tom Libus, he was reelected. Andrea Starzak, barely. What she got 26% or something like that. She did not do well, and he is up on corruption charges. So corruption doesn't seem to really worry the voters that much, at least not in this election.
Corruption or not, though, I don't think she had a chance because I mean that's a very conservative district. That's like Shenango, Broome, Tioga, maybe parts of Delaware County. I mean, I don't think a Democrat had a chance there, regardless of what the Republicans were or were not doing.
Probably another big surprise in this election, Hawkins, the Green Party candidate for governor in Tompkins County, takes 16%. That was the number?
16% was the number that I saw this morning.
I'm not surprised. I'm actually surprised it wasn't higher. I feel like I must be friends with that entire 16% on my Facebook, given the amount of Hawkins support I see online.
Right.
Well, and just to add this last little bit about Cuomo, he didn't make a lot of friends with the Moreland Commission thing. He certainly doesn't seem to have a lot of friends at local government levels who just seem to.
Because of the tax cap,
Because of the tax cap, because of what they deem.
Elimination Act.
Sure, certainly from the schools. But what they deem as his effort to kind of squeeze consolidation, to force local governments into cutting spending, which you ask any town board member in Tompkins County, to cut their spending, and all say the same thing. We have been. We have TCOG, it's a Tompkins County Council of Governments. It's like a Knights of the Round Table of town governments, and they get together and they figure out a way to, to cut expenses. So
they've already been doing that.
They've been already doing that.
So the tax cap, which is an incentive for towns and school districts to keep their property tax under a 2% increase every year. It comes with incentives. It comes with a carrot and a stick. So the carrot is, that you get a tax rebate to the amount that your taxes went up.
About $7, right?
Right. You can buy a sandwich.
Good sandwich, yeah.
And I don't know, what is the stick? Is there a stick to that? Not really. If you don't. Well, if you don't stay under the tax cap,
then you don't get your taxpayers don't get their rebate. That's it.
Yeah.
There's no other consequences.
Right.
They're probably not that mad over $7.
Well, you wouldn't think, but the idea of getting something back instead of having to pay more is kind of a nice incentive.
I don't know.
No?
No.
You don't want a tax break, even if it's a paltry one?
$7?
We had this thing in
the increase.
In the last Bush years where we all got a check for $200 or something right before the, right before
I'm just saying,
summer.
hypothetically speaking, if your taxes are going up $200 a year, $150 a year, whatever it is, it's better to have a $7 check from the state.
But it's,
granted,
it's
small,
yeah, but I know a lot of people would get that $7 check and go, okay, how much did it cost you to send this to me?
Oh, sure.
How much am I paying for this $7 check?
I guess my
who's
point
sitting in an office in Albany somewhere, drawing down, a fat salary, and putting stamps
Vanna
on
and
this
Village
envelope.
is looking ahead at their budget for next year because, village budgets aren't until March that they are dealing with these things. They don't start till June. So they were looking ahead at their budget and deciding that it might actually cost them more to go through the effort of attempting to stay under the tax cap than people would get back in rebates. Like it could end up causing them to have the clerk work more hours and spend more money on trying to comply with this than they will end up saving taxpayers.
Interestingly enough, I didn't realize this, but to be eligible for that incentive, you have to have your townwide tax cap repealed.
Override law repealed.
You need that override repealed. One of the main points one of the main reasons, I should say, why town boards were kind of enacting these local laws to override the tax cap, or this is what they always said, this is always what they told me as a reporter, is that this allowed us to, if we need more cash, cool, we can go get more tax dollars, but we're really only doing it because we have to calculate our own tax cap number, and if we screw it up and we end up passing a budget that's over the cap, then we get hit for penalties and we got to pay money out.
That's what they told me too,
This is what happened in Candor the one year where they went, there's no way we're going to go over this tax cap. But the state formula for the tax cap, it's not exactly 2%. Depending on what your levy is and the other numbers that you plug in, it may be 3.5%. So if you miscalculate, which is what happened, then you have to file late with the state. You have to go through this whole rigmarole because
this was under the previous supervisor.
No, I think it might have been in Bob's first year.
Oh,
where they just didn't think they were going to go over it, and then it turned out that they kind of accidentally had it. It wasn't deliberate. So a lot of the towns have been passing this tax cap override just so, if they get the formula wrong, which is easy to do, they won't be hit with a penalty.
Right.
So now that you have towns repealing that, I'd be interested to see how many towns do in fact screw up their tax cap numbers and pass budgets that are over the cap, but they've since repealed it. So that now puts them in line for state penalties if they go over. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, if they go over. I think
the point is you don't repeal it until your numbers are definite.
Right.
Well,
but we also have a little bit of a rebellion starting here over the tax cap. Ithaca Mayor Svante Myrick said, "Listen, this is just not worth it. For the $7 for a sandwich, we don't need to do this.
City schools went way over their tax cap.
We don't need to do this. We need to keep maintaining our equipment. We need to start putting money back in our reserves. We've been draining our reserves for the last couple of years." Lansing Village, Mayor Don Hartle said, "Nah, we don't need it." Ulysses, Supervisor Liz Thomas and that board, same thing. They went, we're going to go over this tax cap. We're not going to worry about it. The incentive is not worth it. And what we need to do is start thinking about replacing our highway equipment. I believe, half of the equipment that they have in the Ulysses Highway Department is over 10 years old. I mean, some of it is 20 years old. It needs to be replaced, and they don't have enough money in reserves. So they're raising taxes so that, you know, they don't have to spend more repairing equipment than they would in buying equipment. I mean, the towns that have a regular equipment replacement schedule, we turn in our buses every 10 years. They're getting more back for the buses. They're not running them into the ground and then having a huge repair bill. Mm-hmm. So some of the towns are just saying, yeah, it's not worth it.
Mm-hmm. Let's do one more minute on the Peacock and Wallace city judge race. We'll just give some quick hits and we'll move on. Any thoughts?
Yeah, Carrie, you covered that one. We had Rick Wallace versus Seth Peacock. Seth Peacock was sort of the sitting judge.
Yeah, I've got to say I'm glad that Wallace won, because having written the article about Seth Peacock, I didn't really want the judge I'd written negative things about to end up winning. Yeah, I mean that was. I'm actually surprised that Peacock lost by quite that much, because in the primaries it was pretty close. I mean, this was like 1,000 votes or something in the general election here, but in the primaries he only lost to Wallace by like 75 votes.
Yeah, so suddenly there was a bigger...
Right, and I mean, right before the primaries it had come out that he'd been banned from being, that Peacock had been banned from being assigned counsel in 2 different town courts in the county. That seemed only to have a minor effect on that election, but then recently like a few weeks ago, he publicly endorsed Howie Hawkins, which you can't do as a sitting judge. So it was a sort of flagrant violation of the rules of judgeship.
Do you think it was that counted against him, or that he wasn't on a regular major party line?
Yeah.
He ran on what?
The Working Families Party.
Working Families Party.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely some of it, but I think that was... that his endorsing Howie Hawkins had also been all over the media in the past couple weeks, you know.
Right. Yeah. Judges have to walk a very fine line.
Yeah.
They cannot have the appearance of impropriety. So it doesn't matter whether it's improper. If it appears to be improper, that's no good.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to swing it over to Chris here. A story out of Lansing this week involves the Lansing soccer team has filed an appeal. I'm not real clear on it, so Chris, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a pretty exciting boys soccer sectional tournament. Kind of started off with Lansing falling in the ISC large tournament against the Notre Dame. They wound up winning all their games in sectionals up until the final, and they played Notre Dame again in the rematch. Lansing has not lost the sectional title in 3 years. So they've been there before. They went to the state tournament last year, went all the way to the state championship and lost. So they know what they're doing. This is a much younger team this year, but they go up against Notre Dame, who has not won sectionals in 28 years, and Notre Dame beats them for the second time. Both of Lansing's losses on the season were against Notre Dame. So it's a pretty good rivalry going between those two teams. So after the game, it looked like Notre Dame was going to be going to the state tournament. And Adam Heck, who is the Lansing boys soccer coach and is also the IAC boys soccer coordinator, received some emails, some letters, some phone calls, something saying that Notre Dame has been playing an ineligible player all season long.
So what does that mean, Chris? What is an ineligible player?
Well, I mean, it can mean a number of things. In the case for this one, I guess the situation was there was a student who had transferred to Notre Dame and I guess they hadn't filled out the paperwork right, or there's something wrong with how the student got to Notre Dame. It's a private school, so they can recruit and they can get kids to come outside of the area.
All right.
So I guess no one really knows exactly what the problem is yet. The trial is going to be tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and both schools will present their cases as to exactly what went wrong, or for Notre Dame, what they did right. So no one's really sure exactly what the illegal move was, but they're saying that it had something to do with how the student transferred. Over in Rochester in Section 5, there's been another situation like this where a player played in the sectional game after breaking his wrist and missing a bunch of practices and a bunch of games, and so he was ineligible in that case because
he was
didn't
a quarterback.
have
Quarterback, right?
Yeah, and he's supposed to be this stud kid. He's supposed to be this like unbelievable player. Is going to go D1 and 5-star recruit and all this stuff, and he's a sophomore. They're saying he's one of the best sophomores in high school football right now in the country, not just in New York State or in Section 5. But he was ineligible because of some missed practices and games, and so he wasn't allowed to play. And so there's a lawsuit over in Rochester, which Aquinas ended up losing, and so now they're out of the state or sectional tournament. So some controversy there, and now to see another ineligible player lawsuit happen, not that far. I mean, what, hour and a half away.
And the sectional championship is riding on this?
Yeah, well, yeah, sectional championship and a trip to the state tournament as well.
So could this mean that Lansing could move on? Even
Yeah,
though they lost? Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if they win the lawsuit tomorrow, they will not only be sectional champions, but they'll be in the state tournament after, we just assumed that they lost for the first time in 3 years. And kind of their reign of dominance. I mean, I wouldn't say it's come to a close because they're a pretty young team. They have a lot of new faces. They're probably going to be back in the sectional championship again, you'd think, next season. But just the streak of, winning sectional tournament after sectional tournament we all thought was over. And now here they are. It's up to a judge if maybe they're back in states, and maybe they even advance all the way to the state championship. I mean, Elmira Notre Dame is going to be the #1 seed in the state tournament in Class C. They were undefeated all season. They did not lose one game, and now it could be now the #1 seed could be out, and a team that wasn't even supposed to be in it could be the #1 seed. So it'd be kind of a shock.
So keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
That'll be in the Lansing Ledger. Actually,
Yeah.
it'll be in all our Finger Lakes papers next week.
For sure.
All right, we got a few minutes left, so let's kind of roll through a couple other stories here. One of the big ones coming out of the towns, Candor Schools has got a proposed $21 million capital project on the table, which is astronomical. So I'm going to swing it to Carrie, who's covered this, and get the details on that.
So they're going. $19.5 million of it would be covered by state building aid, and they'd be using about $2 million of reserves. So Jeff Kozlowski, the superintendent, is talking about how it's not going to affect taxes, and I mean it won't, other than that it's using reserves, and you'll need to replenish reserves eventually. But the project does a number of little things. There's
security was a big part of it. Newfield did something similar shortly after.
Newfield made more substantial changes, and its security was not as good to begin with. I mean, Candor's already got better security than Newfield had previously. And it's a lot of little things. There's some technology in there. There's some, there's 2 new classrooms. They're restructuring the entrances for the buildings. And the vote is today. At one of the info sessions, there were some citizens that were very angry that they hadn't been given more advance notice on this. And Jeff Kozlowski said, no, we've brought it up at every single board meeting. And I've been at every single board meeting, and they did not bring it up at every single board meeting. So, I found that it's kind of concerning. I mean,
There's something odd about this,
yes.
because most schools that we cover, when they do a capital project, boy, it's a long process.
Yeah.
They,
We didn't get the kind of notice
trot
or
it
the,
out. They
yeah.
tell you blow by blow what they're going to do. We're going to
Yeah.
fix the middle school stairs. We're going to,
And they talk about it. They
put
actually
in
do
a new
talk about it
HVAC
at every board
system.
meeting.
Yeah,
That didn't
right.
happen.
So,
At least not in the public portion.
But $21 million is a pretty substantial sum of
Yeah.
money. It sounds like they're going to be doing
Jeff Kozlowski's also
some.
talking about how they'll make money on this project, which is not entirely true.
Yeah, how do you make money? How?
Well, because they have a good,
they have a bond falling
yeah.
off.
Well, they have a good financial stability rating or whatever, so they get a good rate on bonds, and the bonds are, but the state reimburses at the average, and they're getting better than average, so they end up getting reimbursed for what they're borrowing more than they actually borrowed, but they're not actually completely not spending money because they are using reserves on it.
Okay, we got 30 seconds. Glynis, what's going on in Sampson Park? I'm going to put you on the spot real quick.
The Sampson State Park up in Romulus is looking for public input for their master plan. Where do we go from here with Sampson Park? They get they have about 2,000 acres. They have 309 campsites. And the Seneca White Deer group are looking at this as perhaps an opportunity to get some state attention or some parkland for the white deer. Once the fence comes down at the old Seneca Army Depot, the famous white deer herd will be dispersed.
All right. It's a story that we will be watching in the coming weeks. Thanks for joining us on our first episode of Around the Lake. We got to our
Gary Blake is
Carrie.
here.
We got Glynis, and for Chris, I'm Lou DePietro with the Ithaca Times. We'd like to thank Joe Scaglione. He's one of our sponsors with Photography 4D. Check us out all week, every day, Ithaca.com. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Enjoy. We'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.